Hey, yo, I'm standing at the bar with a Cuban cigar.
Well, today, the ashes of former Cuban dictator Fidel Castro, they will reach their final resting place in the city of Santiago. While there have been days of mourning in Cuba, in the streets of U.S. cities like Miami, where Cuban Americans who fled the island, there have been celebratory rallies to mark Castro's demise.
Marion Smith is here. He is the executive director of Victims of Communism Memorial. Marion, we appreciate you coming in today. You know, we've seen these scenes. I want to talk to you about this. We've seen these scenes of these Cubans crying and being emotional and carrying on. How much of that is dictated by the Cuban government that is ordering those people into the streets to participate in this?
Yeah. Well, we do know that there are many dissidents in Cuba that have been threatened to stay home. We know that there are dissidents such as El Sexto, who has been beaten, is arrested. His fiancée is very worried about his safety at this point.
So people are required to participate in this?
Well, people are heavily encouraged to support the regime, right? It's a culture of intimidation and fear since 1959 on the island, and dissidents are jailed and beaten and sometimes killed.
So, Marion, what does it mean, though? Because if Castro's brother is still in power, I mean, is it really? I watched one person, I mentioned it to Tom last week, a Cuban-American, who said that even though this is not necessarily a change in Cuban policy, it is symbolic, and it means something very powerful to them to see his passing. But what is the future for them? Is it just the same?
Well, unfortunately, the U.S. Diplomatic opening in the last year and a half has done more to solidify the Communist Party's control with Raul Castro and a younger generation of Castros. What we should be talking about right now is what comes next for the Cuban people. But, of course, the future of the Communist Party is secure because they've gotten access to international capital and legitimacy.
Raul Castro says he will leave in 2018. We don't know if he will leave in 2018, but yet there does seem to be this concern right now that things could even get worse for the Cuban people in this in-between time. Castro's been out of power officially for 10 years now, but is there a concern right now, people you talk to, that this government, this Cuban communist dictatorship, is going to clamp down and get its clutches even tighter right now to dissuade anybody of any ideas from making a move on the Castro regime?
Yeah. Well, of course, we should have demanded economic or political reform as part of our diplomatic opening. We did not. And so it looks like, yes, they are going to stay in power. And, you know, they're going to survive Fidel. They're going to survive Raul because they have implemented a cabal of corrupt leaders where the interest of the party and those in power come first. And the Cuban people serve basically the interest of a corrupt totalitarian state.
So really quickly, we have 30 seconds. Do you feel that Cuban Americans, just from your take, do they feel hope from a Trump presidency or do they feel concern?
Well, I think it's hopeful that we're talking about the victims of Fidel Castro. And President-elect Trump made that clear. Tonight in Washington at 4:30, we are gathering at the Victims of Communism Memorial to remember the victims of Fidel Castro. We've heard about Fidel the man, Fidel the leader, Fidel the revolutionary. We need to hear about Fidel the murderer, because if we know the truth about what has happened since '59, we can get closer to justice and democratic reform for the Cuban people.
He literally passes on to the ash heap of history now, and we hope the best for the Cuban people moving forward. Marion Smith, we appreciate you coming in and joining us this morning to talk about this issue.